Below average ground, we all have it. If you farm, you probably have a farm that you say, why do I farm this? Maybe you bought it. Maybe it's what you're born into. Maybe you rent it. Maybe you do as a favor. But you know what we're going to talk about in this episode of The Granary? We're going to talk about crappy farm ground, how to do it, and why you do it. On a farm, the work's never really done. We're calling the day anyway, because my friends from XtremeAg are coming over. You ready for a conversation with some real farmers about real issues? And the best part? You're invited. So pour yourself a drink, grab a snack, most importantly, pull up a chair. Welcome to The Granary. Hey guys. All right, Tommy, this is your topic. By the way, I'm sitting here with my good friend Tommy Roach with Nachurs, Matt Miles, Chad Henderson, XtremeAg guys. Just for the viewer, nobody knew we were going to talk about this topic except for you, because last night you said we were talking about crappy ground, and you said, God, we should do a whole granary episode about that, sitting around at the granary talking about the crappy ground we farm. I said, well, my buddy Troy came over the other night, and when Will was talking to him, he said, there's a reason that our buddy Zip doesn't have any hips or back left. I picked up rocks every spring of my entire growing up and then spent the summer baling 10,000 bales of hay that we grew off of that crappy ground. I think I got a good handle on crappy ground, but I don't have what these guys have. I don't have the farming experience they have. You got any crappy ground stories?
I just know that this is your home place, and it's a pretty place. It is a pretty place. So, when we go on these farms and we get to travel up north and get to see farms, and, they have this pile of rocks out there, and they always have a pile of rocks it's like a pile of rocks. Like it's 3 tribes of loads of rocks out there these boys pick up. He's got like 10 rocks out there. And he's talking about I've been picking up rocks all my life. There's like 10. I'm going to take 2 of them.
I didn't put them all here.
I'm going to take 2 of them home with me, to keep your door open.
You said it's a fun topic to cover because you know what? Everybody has that farm, whether they own it, rent it, or whatever. Maybe that's the only. Everybody has a crappy farm story, meaning farm ground.
So where I grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and Chad's I'm sure we'll talk about this in a minute, but he's worried about buildings and Amazon and all this stuff gobbling up his acres. So where I grew up, places where I was cutting hay, plowing, whatever. There's NASCAR tracks now. There's Alliance Airport now. There's houses, subdivision, championship golf courses. They're everywhere.
Right.
And it's not the best ground. They were digging subsoil and gravel to build all these different things. So you can turn, I guess, moral of the story is you can turn the crappiest ground that you think you have into something that can grow a crop in this instance.
I was going to say one thing that I know, if there's a stone quarry within a mile of you, you probably have crappy ground. That's just one of my observations. Oh, yeah. Matt, okay, you're down in the Delta. It's flat as a pancake. I'd never been there until I came to Deshay County, Arkansas. Other than you kind of scared me about cottonmouths and poisonous snakes. Other than that, I don't think you have crappy ground. I think you have low organic matter ground. I think you have, it needs a lot of water kind of ground. I don't think you have crappy ground. I didn't see anything that I would call crappy.
I would like to see what your ground would do if it was 20 degrees cooler. Just where it didn't bake at the beach on top.
Pack it up and take it to North Dakota.
It's not much better there, right?
Probably grow potatoes in North Dakota.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you a funny story. We're on a webinar, and Chad's on there, and he's talking about his crappy ground. He said, my crappy ground, that sand is my crappy ground. And I stopped on the webinar. I said, Chad, you're talking about your crappy ground. My best ground is a sand. You remember that?
Yeah.
He didn't know what to say because
he took offense to it, just like you talking about.
But let me tell you this. In my area, the red dirt, which is his best ground, is our crappiest ground.
You've got some more challenges because you've got some curve and you've got that clay that gets kind of cooked, from my opinion and from my impression. I've never farmed in North Alabama. I don't think you have rocks. You said us Midwest boys talk about rocks. I don't think you have rocks. Do you have rocks?
I have gravel compared to y'all's rocks. How about that?
And we don't have any.
You know, like anything under this
Mm.
would be a gravel compared to y'all's rocks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I look at is, as I look at the depth of the topsoil, you know, and at max, I don't know what you are. At max, we're 6 inches. Would you not agree?
If that.
Yeah, probably more like 4. I say 6 because it makes me feel better.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so, and then like you said, the OEM is less than
0 to 0.5%.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, when you go look at guys land in the Midwest, and you're right about that land around Dallas, I've seen it. It's tough. But when you go look at guys land in the Midwest, you know, it's a whole different world. I actually thought the red dirt, because of my red dirt, when the first time I went to Chad's, was going to be worse than the sand.
Mm.
It's actually better. I mean, it's actually your better dirt. It's got more moisture holding capacity.
And, you know, we can put, you know, in the bottoms, we may have up to a foot. You know, but up on the hills, I mean, we're like, Matt, we'll
4
have
inches.
inches.
Yeah.
Well, they won't even. There's crops, and the same thing with me on dry land. If I still had it, but on those blow sand hills, you know, like over by the airport, you know, nothing grow there.
Yeah, right. So I mean, we'll just, you know, you figure out where those spots are, and you do like you used to do in the old days. You line them up with gin trash. You dump a bunch of chicken litter on them. You know, you do whatever you can do to keep heal them up.
But what's the alternative? I mean, you're the guy that should be able to tell us, how can you fix crabby ground?
It's not an overnight deal. And
Sell it.
You've got to.
What was your answer? Sell it?
Sell it.
Yeah, right.
Sell it.
Build houses
Build
on it.
Amazon.
Yeah, build houses on it.
And it's definitely not, you've got to use the practice of spoon feeding, because you definitely can't put it all out there, you know, and planning or before and go take vacation.
He's right. I tried that. That won't work.
It won't work for me at all. Like zero.
And you mentioned about his red dirt.
Yep.
So if you look at Alabama, Oklahoma, parts of Texas, where they make bricks to build houses, that's why he has a hard trouble with his red dirt, because it turns into a brick.
But his red dirt is your best dirt, correct?
Yeah, well,
Or
but
can it get too red?
you can have very red, and then it goes into a chocolate in the bottom, you know, but it's not a chocolate like what they would see up here, in the Midwest, you know, but it's a different color red, you know. When you can get that in it, you know, it'll hold good moisture. And two, we've done a better job, I think, over the years, you know, our from back in the years where you had 100 years of cotton.
Yeah.
You know, and the cotton's like a tree, you know, and all it does is pull. All it does is pull. It don't get back.
We didn't do some of our, and take this the right way.
Yeah.
As a Midwesterner, and I'm not insulting where you are from, we didn't do Southern soils any justice by cottoning them for a century.
Right.
We took what was already kind of sensitive
but
and then
Well,
depleted
you know how happy we were when corn went to $4 and beans went to $10, $11? Because we could actually get out of some cotton.
Yeah.
And it'll make 200 pounds different on cotton and 10 bushel beans, just having that one corn crop. That was one mistake I made this year. Cut all my corn out, just about. Mm-hmm. And it's a losing proposition this year.
Yeah.
But if you look at what I lost on, if I'd have had it rotated next year's crop, I would have actually at least broke even. And I'll grow corn to break even to have that yield on the other crop.
Yeah, you said that in a different recording, or maybe it was on one of our podcasts. And I think that's something that's a long-term look that most people would maybe not be as good at until they've experienced.
And I'm telling you, like, it's just like out here on your ground, you know, and I mean, I know you've got the depth of it, but on your ground here, I see where they've cut the corn stalks off of it, build the corn stalks up. That's
silage, but yeah.
It's the same thing. I mean, the silage is just like cotton. It just pulls it off. So when we started getting more irrigation in our areas, and we can, big crops make big crops. Okay, you make a big crop, and then it makes another big crop, and it starts putting that back in the ground. And until we could do that, like our organic matter, last time we grew cotton, in say 2006, my organic matter was 3/4 to 1%.
Yeah.
Okay, today about all my organic matter is 2.8 to 3.2, 3.3.
So you've taken crappier ground and made it better because of your practices.
Well, I mean, it's just and we've got better. We won't say like, oh, well, we've done this. I mean, I think that we've got better varieties. We've got better suited varieties for the areas. We've better farming practices. We've had better technology. There's a lot of things that's come down the pipeline that's made us farmers better.
You've
you
got
know?
corn and wheat rotation.
And we've got
wheat,
corn.
People don't give enough credit to
That's
wheat
right.
for OEM.
And we're putting three crops in 2 years, so we just keep piling the stover back in it.
Unless you take the straw, which
That's right.
which is the same
Unless
thing
you
as
take
cotton.
the straw.
What's interesting, and since you get around the country, they do now. I mean, with XtremeAg, we're all over and they're going. They're seeing farmers all over the place. But you see enough farm people, and you're around enough agricultural audiences and whatnot. It's kind of funny. There's almost a competition. Just like, okay, you go to a sales meeting. Say you're sitting at the bar at a sales meeting.
We definitely got a handicap.
And you say, you think you got a bad territory? You ought to come to my territory. It's this competition of who's got what.
Who's got the worst?
You know what? Farmers, if you go to a bunch of farm meetings, there'll be every one of them's got to make sure they go around the table like, well, yeah, you got some light soils, but you ain't got what I got. And it becomes this competition. Tell them, the guy who wins the argument over who has the shittiest soil doesn't really win.
No, that's what I was going to say. I'd rather be the guy that has the best soil.
Yeah.
But you're not.
No.
But you're also not the worst. But there's a competition over who's got it worse.
But you know what? And I say this a lot in meetings. People want to talk about our 100 bushel beans. And high yield is not necessarily a number. So the number for a high yield soybean is not 100 bushel. The number is whatever you can improve the normal average bushels you grow on your farm.
Yeah,
so if you're on 50 bushel an acre soybean ground and you can increase that to 70, that's a better return than me on 80 bushel increasing it to 90.
Yeah.
Well, me and Temple was having a conversation on the way up here, and we was talking about like, hey, well, how are we going to do this? A lot of our trials we're doing now, we had a 1 bushel return. Oh, we had a 3 bushel return. Okay, well, if you're making 30 bushel beans and you had a 3 bushel return,
10%.
We made 10%.
Yeah.
Right.
You're talking about $30 an acre at $10 beans. So, we kind of need to change our mindset about what the percentage is on what we're doing. Because double crop bean and we made 60 bushel. Well, you didn't do nothing. Well, can't everybody make 60 bushel double crop beans either?
That's right. 1 bushel on 100 bushels, 1%. Right?
That's right. So
what's the crappiest farm? I'll go around here. We'll stick with you. You're on a streak here. The crappiest you've got
on a streak. I can do this all day.
I know you can. I like it. You got 7,000 acres that you're operating right now. You're down a little bit because you gave up the farm you used to farm over in Georgia, if I'm not mistaken, right? Okay.
Yep.
So you're down on acreage because you gave up some stuff or got taken from you, development, whatever. You've lost acreage to home and development.
Always moving.
But the point is, I bet you didn't lose your crappiest ground. You still have a farm that either you own or you rent or you share that's crappy. Yes?
Well, it's just like beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? So crappy, I don't really think I got any farms that's crappy, you know what I'm saying? I got farms that's better than others.
Yeah.
But, look at what we do as farmers. Let's talk about how we're going to manage a crappy farm. So let's just say you have a crappy farm. I don't really like that at all. Let's say you have
a below average or a
average farm.
ugly duckling.
How about we have an average farm? It's not above average, but it's not crappy.
What do you call your worst fields?
It's not. We're talking to me.
Ugly ducklings? I know, but
We're talking to
I
me.
get the right terminology. You get the right term? Poor.
Let's say we have
Poor ground.
a lesser farm.
Yeah, I like your words better than mine.
So we have a lesser farm, right? So how are we going to manage that farm? Because a lot of times, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, by the time you pay the rent, because you're building the production, a lot of the landlords work with you on that. Mm-hmm. Hey, we know that we've got a lesser farm. I'll tell you what, we got a better question real quick for that. How many great farms do you purchase? You always purchase a rough farm and you make it into a great farm. Right. You can't go purchase that great farm. It's out of your pocketbook. You can't afford it. Mm. So it's the same terminology when you're building a farm. And that's what we're doing. We're building it. But look at the ground that Tommy and I have done a lot of trials on. And we figured out how to make a living on lesser soils.
Yeah, lesser.
We're we're friendly here.
You're probably just about the most politically correct describer of farm properties I've ever heard.
He's trying to make himself feel better.
He refuses to say crappy, thin, poor. He just says things like lesser, maybe a touch below average. You're like big boned. I mean,
big bone.
Big bones.
All right. Here's the thing. Everybody has one. You've got a property that if I just said, all right, across your acres, name the chunk of ground that's
Go ahead
The
and
most
name it.
challenging.
Let's say if you're working in the spring. Go ahead and name it. You name my farm.
Matt, does it come to mind just like that?
Yeah.
Okay. And do you own it or rent it or sharecrop it?
Both.
Okay.
I own some and I share some.
The worst one.
And he said both.
Well,
I've got
two that's one of my own and one of my.
Okay,
That's
they're neck
fence.
and neck. They suck equally together.
Yeah.
All right. One of them you own, one of them you're on a rent deal.
And they're crappy and poor and whatever else bad name.
Hey, whatever.
Lesser.
Adjectives that.
Is that farm you gonna leave Lane? You're definitely gonna leave that to
Definitely
Lane.
You're gonna leave that. You're gonna leave that to one of the kids you don't like.
Well,
Hey,
to be
whichever
honest with
kid
you-
puts him in the home is the one that's going to inherit that one.
That farm.
That's right.
What do you do different about that? How do you manage it differently?
Well, you know, of course, you figure out what the top yield is on it, and you'll know that by your top yield on your better fields, and then you manage that farm accordingly. You know, on a budget. You know, if I think I'm gonna make 80 bushel beans on field A, and we're talking about field D, and I know it's gonna be 65, I'm gonna manage for 65 bushel beans
So
because I can't get that 80 bushel.
you keep the expense in line with what the absolute proven, what do they call it, APH, but in yours
Yeah.
it's expected. It's almost known.
Well,
So-
in APH, I don't even look at that. I look at what my 5-year average is and my 10-year average is.
So Matt, what's our mentality? What's your mentality on building that farm? What's our mentality? Is it a 5-year game plan? Is it a 10-year game plan? Is it a lifelong game plan?
Well, if it's something I own, it's a lifelong. You know, if it's something I'm renting, I have to kind of be a little more careful on that. So just depends on the situation. I know that don't really answer your question, but you can improve a farm in 5 years.
I
I
think
mean,
so.
quite a bit.
Let me ask y'all a question. So if
If you got the money.
we'll take a farm or multiple farms, and we'll say 50% of those acres are average, 25 are below average, and 25 is above average. So what are you going to do? How are you going to increase your overall productivity? You're going to focus on this down here on this 25 bad acres, or the 50
average,
or the 25?
I think the 50.
I think the 25 bad.
Well,
See, if it were me, this is one of those deals that this is what it is, and you just try to
Mitigate
manage it
the
as
loss.
best you could.
right. This one,
I would focus more on what the potential. You have greater potential for this 75% than you do
Yeah.
this 25%.
well, you think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is common math. You know, I can take a guy that's asking me questions and he's a 60 bushel farmer. I can normally get him to 70 or 75 bushel. But if he's an 80 bushel farmer,
It's hard to get
I'm
improvement.
probably not going to improve him very much.
You're going to get him to 82.
Maybe, yeah. And he's like, well, I didn't give it 2 bushel.
And
Well,
that's
yeah,
where-
you're already at 80.
By the way, I love I'm sorry. I love the contemplation because that is so true. All right. You bring in, you former Division I football player. You bring in someone that's decent, but has a lot of work to be done. You can take a premier athlete, and they're never going to not be a premier athlete. You can take someone that's an average athlete, but a work ethic, and probably with a little work, you'll take them from here to here. So I think that's the one where I think an average can get better with less work. The poor, you maybe aren't going to do much with. The great, you're not going to get much room on. At this point, I can take you from 50 bushels to 75 easier than I can take you from 75 to 100.
So
Yeah.
what I was thinking on that is I had farm down there, at Swancott that we own,
Mm-hmm.
and we had 7 acres of it out of 182 acres was a zero. Every year we couldn't get it planted, swamp, pivot run across it, so I had added expense on top of it. And you may get it planted and then you couldn't get it. So if you
Then it
ever
would
plant
die.
it, then it died, then you're really in the hole, So when you fix those acres,
Yeah.
then you immediately went up.
All right, so
you have to go after even the corners, edges, fence rows, like you just start
Well,
pulling all of
So
it.
he went with
And-
fix the
and-
poorest. I went with fix the average.
And he went with fix
You
the
went
average.
fix the
I
best.
went with average.
Oh,
No, he didn't go with the best.
I thought you said fix the
He
best.
said the
He
average.
was average, you was average.
All right, but to back to what Chad said. So, I learned this from an agronomist I had, and we'd just say it's a 100-acre field. And he'd say, man, this 10 acres down here, it sucks. And I'd be like, it's 10 acres. It's a 100-acre field. And he's like, yeah, it's 10%.
10, yeah.
And when I started realizing, maybe one drainage pipe, maybe I spend $20 an acre down there running a finishing bucket.
Maybe the watering wasn't good enough.
Right. Like what you're talking about. Normally on my situation, it was drainage, but when you start looking at that micromanaging, I guess you would call it, those 10-acre spots, 7-acre spots that you'd say, well, how big is Wincock?
Yeah, 182 acres.
And there's 7 acres. Well,
Yeah.
that's what, almost 5% of the
That's
farm.
right.
So if you were making 100 bushel beans, you're making 95 on the whole farm because of that 7.
Yeah.
So when you start looking at those pockets in a field, maybe in my situation, I'll have a little dip go down and so it stays wet all the time. Well, it's out in the middle of the field.
Yeah.
You keep seeing that red spot on the map. What's going on? What's going on? Look at elevations. Well, I could run a finishing bucket on 5 acres and eliminate that. So, and there's so many, I see this like I do a lot of hunting in Kansas, and there'll be a field there and it'll have a low in it.
Mm.
And it just stays wet all the time. They don't make anything. When one little PTO ditch, I call it a PTO ditch or a blade for 50 yards takes that out.
You may not be able to hunt whatever you're hunting, though.
That's true.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
But I mean, you can take minor adjustments and make big differences on those pockets like the 7.
But you gotta look for the low hanging fruit.
That's right.
What's interesting is you guys went to portions of fields, and I guess I was raised on some chunks that there was no good portion of a field. So I just went with
those fields you manage to the ability of the field.
Yeah.
It's just like you said with athlete. If you got a mediocre athlete and he's not going to get any better, you put him in a position on the team that's not going to make you win or lose.
But you can at least go out and do
Go out and do an average job.
Do the job.
So, one thing, maybe 2 things.
Lots of things.
So, Kevin's not here, but like Kevin farms and a lot, and your farm is the same way. You have a lot of tree lines, and he's scooted out away from the tree line because you're wasting seed, you're wasting everything. You're not going to get any productivity off of, trying to fight trees. I mean, you're fighting losing battles. So why not move out away from that?
Quit spending money there.
I mean, it's an easy place to start.
Because the one thing you'd say is,
put it in grace.
It'd say, well, you're wasting that acreage, but the other thing is you're wasting the seed, the diesel, the chemical, the fertilizer.
You're compounding. You're compounding the problem because you're not going to make anything on it anyway.
Tree roots, especially in a dry year, the tree roots are good for 30 feet, no question.
That's right.
Yeah.
What do they say?
They'll take all that.
High, as far as they are high.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
And so seeing is believing, and I know you've been to Precision in Illinois. So I don't know if they do it every year, but they have a board that shows differences in ear size based on when that plant emerged. So you want to try to get everything open in 12 hours. So you have ears based on 12 hours. Then you have ears based on 24 hours and 36 and 48. What would you think a lot of people say that they want to focus on to get better? Is it those 48 hours, or maybe I know the right answer is you're only losing about 3, 4, 5 rows or kernels around on the tip. And it doesn't look like it's a whole lot different than the normal 12-hour immersed plant. People want to go to the ugly little nubs that's up there at 48 hours. That's not the right answer. You got to improve on getting all the plants moved from 24 down to 12.
Because the percentage is higher.
That's right.
You look at crappy below poor. What's the word he said?
Lesser.
Big boned. But he called it
Big bone.
It's different for every operator. I want to go around the table here. Some farmer operators, they're probably well off enough with what they got. They could just let the worst. It's the old thing like in business. If you let 10% of your worst customers go away, you're probably better off. There's probably some farmers that would probably be better off if they let the worst 10% of the ground they had just go. Some other poor, desperate bastard that's just eager to get out there and...
or that has more time.
To vote to it?
Yeah.
So,
you know,
what's your approach on, moving forward? do you say, I don't want to fool with poor ground anymore, or I'm going to actually, if the stuff that come up down the road is not great, but I'm here? What's your approach?
My approach is I'm going to fool with poor ground because that's all I know. You know, I mean, you know, and we joke about that. We do joke about it in here.
It's not poor though; it's lesser.
Lesser. I'm going to fool with lesser ground. But you know, at this point where I'm at in my life and my career, it's fun for me to take a challenge.
You kind of like the challenge.
I kind of like the challenge. You know, you want to fix something. You want to see your work. You know, you want to see like this is better. You know, I accomplished something here. You know, and that's what us as farmers we're doing. You know, we're you know, people. A lot of times a suburban mom, you know, she's looking at us like, you know, we're spraying stuff or we're doing things that, and we're by far the best advocate for, you know, for the soil because that's all we got to make a living with. So we want to see things better. We want to see things nicer. We want to see clean water running out of the ditches, you know, and with that, that's the goals we have in mind every day.
You would feel rewarded knowing that there's a certain customer base that thinks you're doing evil to the environment. At least personally, you'd go home and go to bed at night saying, you know what, they don't understand. I took this turd over here and I made it better for the soil, better for the soil health, better for the environment.
I just shined it right up.
But is it my turn?
Sure.
So,
my turn.
Well, so what Chad's saying, you know, it depends on how big boned it is. You know, so I've been blessed to the point today after 35 crops that I've got an opportunity that I don't have. I took big bone ground majority of my life.
Yep.
But you can look at a farm, Chad can look at the farm and he can say, okay, I know I can improve this. And that's when you get the reward. If you know you can improve it based on what it's been before, it's more fun than having this high dollar ground here that anybody can farm.
And you'll look at it sometimes, you'll spend time on it and you'll be like, man, I won't give my money back. You're like, oh, well, it wasn't that bad, you know?
Yeah. But now it can be so big bone that you know you can't improve it, and you know I'm probably going to walk away from.
But then do we look at it like with the mentality you had earlier when you spread it across your whole acres? It's pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, maybe there's a certain role that your lesser ground has within your whole mix. It's kind of like an investment portfolio. Well, I got this high flying stock, and I also have this boring CD. I mean, is that kind of how you would look at it?
Well, and I said it earlier. It kind of you have to look at those acres as you know what it is what it is. They are what they are, and you manage it as good as you.
Yeah, when you know that it's not 300 bushel ground corn, then don't treat it
like
it
for 300.
But most of the big bone ground's going to have the owner's going to own some small bone ground to go with. Honestly,
you know, and the thing
so
is,
you
too,
have
it's
to
a
take
real,
it to get the
it's a big accomplishment on some of this ground to make 200 bushel on 22,000 plants. I mean, I just soon do that as make, you know,
back to the high yield is based on the ground,
and it's also based on how much money we're making because it's all about it ain't about making bushels. It's about making money.
This is where I'm glad.
I want to make some money.
You brought me to my next favorite thing. This is why we love sitting here at the Granary and having real discussions. I was going to go right to the money. You know, it's just like, okay, there's a scrapyard owner. A scrapyard don't look pretty, right? It's ugly as hell. You go to a scrapyard, there's junk, it's all that. The scrapyard owner might be more well off than the plastic surgeon, right? So, farming crappy ground, if you do it because you've done it, I know, trust me, I got a guy down here, he's been farming in the rocks of the Wabash River for his whole career. He's not in it for much. So equipment gets banged up more, but you keep going back to, I'm not in it for much. You can make it work. You can make a case for, but the return on investment because you're not in it for much. Is that right?
Back to what I'm saying, you budget based on the productivity of the ground.
You can't build.
So if you've got lesser ground, big bone ground, then you're not going to spend the money on that ground that you would on this ice cream ground over here. And so you may make more net profit than the guy over here blowing it out on this high yield ground.
Tommy, you see the whole country. You travel all of North America in your job. Could you give an example? You're not going to name names. Yep, everybody thought this guy was a lunatic. He farmed in some of the crappiest place ever. Versus this.
I was going to say he's going to mention me.
This guy over here, conversely, is in the
lost your man.
The Red River Valley, or you can start. I'm talking about the one in North Dakota. You know, you can start naming pockets.
He's not talking about Texas County.
There's a guy in Madison, Alabama.
You could.
God, does anybody need a drink?
Can you name the dichotomy that most people wouldn't think of? Like, yep, this is probably someone probably thought, oh, you're broke because you farming the crap, and you're probably rich because you're farming the good, and it's actually the inverse.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go to places right in the middle of the Corn Belt that they've been doing it the same way forever because they're making
Money.
good,
Modest yield. Yeah.
money. But if they would just focus on a few minor
Tweak it.
details, you would see so much greater improvement. I mean, so much.
I mean, we pick on Lee. We pick on Lee's ground up there, and say, well, 14 people up there, but I mean, we do pick on it. But look at the ground they've got and look at the way they manage that and how much different it is from the way, like any of the other people in XtremeAg manage their ground, and to watch it and to learn from taking what they've got and doing something with it, compared to like when you see you down there in Texas and you see Lee in Dakotas and then Kevin all the way over on the coast,
Well, we've been down there, and you drive by Lee's fields, you can pick his fields out from anybody else's. He's took that big bone ground, and
he's managing average ground at a very high potential, and you don't want to bash on the neighbors, but it's pretty darn evident because I was there, and I'm like, well, the darkness, because of organic matter from he did a no-tiller start 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So, Matt, tell me what you think about this, because me and you started in this adventure, and this, when they asked us to come into XtremeAg, and I know, everywhere I go, like I pull up here at Damian's, I look out across the field, I'm like, I wonder how I'd work that. Like everywhere we go, I'm like, I wonder how I'd work that. So how many places, when we say, I wonder how I'd work that, how many places have me and you, or have you, and I would say me, how many places have we been right on how we would work it? Like
probably not many.
Like
in a different area. Kind of like we were talking about in an earlier episode. We change our farm, and then we don't know how to do what we changed it to.
I mean, I remember when I went to Kelly's first time, and you talk about going that, and if nobody thinks that ain't nothing less about the Les Hills, and I know I ain't spelled the Les Hills, but right. I mean, ain't nothing less about it, and you look at that, I'm like, I don't even know where I'd start.
Yeah, I can get overwhelmed out there because it's so different from when
I had to be tumped over.
I mean, you guys think it's different from you. I'm supposed to be an I-state. What happens at Kelly Garrett's and what happens at my part of the world, we're supposed to be I-states. It's about as disparate as anything.
He should have, it should be a whole nother letter.
Yeah, right.
What did Vern say on that show? Anybody can farm that flat ground like in South Dakota.
So
I thought he was going to say Arkansas, but he said South Dakota, so I got out of that.
So that's what I'll go with. The old thing of if you're given a whole bunch of God-given athleticism, it's easy to be an average athlete. If you're given not so much and work a lot harder at it, maybe the same thing goes with soil. Do you think the people that are able to make it on crappier ground are better?
I don't think they know they got crappy ground.
Maybe that's it.
They manage what they know.
Yeah.
I mean, like if I was to try to do what he does or Kelly does, I'd fail. But if they tried to do what goes on around South Plains and Lubbock, I mean, they would probably fail as well.
That whole circle, and then we'd screw up.
Yeah.
Half of it was dry land.
Because you wouldn't have any water to do that.
Yeah. So we'd screw the whole circle up instead of just farming half of it and letting this half lay out.
I think we had a good discussion here about lesser to average ground, because every farmer, there's not a farmer I've ever met that didn't claim that they had a crappy, well, that's Smith property over there. You want to see what? He's like, hey, things look really good over there. Yeah, we should see the back of it. It's whatever. It's wet. It's rocky. It's this, whatever. Everybody has a story. Am I right?
Yep.
Every farmer you've ever met now, it tells you they've got a place that you wouldn't know how to farm it. It's too bad. Too crappy. Anyway, we're talking about below average ground. It's a great topic here at the Granary. We are so glad you joined us. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Nachurs. Nachurs is with, that's who Tommy Roach is with. You know what's cool about Nachurs? All their fertility products are being used by the guys. A lot of it in furrow, very, very much dialing in, putting the fertility where it needs to be versus flinging it out there unnecessarily. Probably from an environmental standpoint, good ground or bad ground, you're going to be under the scrutiny to do that. lesser ground. You're going to be under scrutiny to do that.
I like the
So
big
anyway, BioK technology is in every one of their products, and it's a kind of a cool deal. Here at XtremeAg, we've teamed up in partnership with BioK. So anyway, if you want to learn more, go to Nachurs.com. Till next time, you're welcome anytime to Granary. You should pull up a chair right here and enjoy us. It's real discussions about real issues with real farmers coming at you. You're invited. Please share this with somebody that'll enjoy it. Till next time, cheers from the Granary.
Did you wonder that was a topic?